Hey, we've been in this series, Now What? Now What moment's a faith moment. It's an opportunity. You ever get into a moment and you don't know, you didn't see that one coming? You know, I thought about naming the series that. I didn't see that one coming. A now what moment is an opportunity. I mean, you can put the spiritual lens on. It's an opportunity for your faith to grow. It's an opportunity to make a decision. It's an opportunity, and in our context today, to do the will of God or deny the will of God. Doing or denying. That's really the concept. I found myself years ago, Mom and Dad had a place, and we had some acreage, and it was my job as a teenager to take care of the property, and it would take me the better probably a half to 3/4 of a day to mow with this tractor we had. It's lawn tractor, and one of the duties was the weed eater or the weed trimmer, and we had this huge railroad tie wall. It was stacked railroad ties, and you could park on top and then down below, and so the grass would grow. And so one day I've done this. I know what I'm getting into, and as I'm weed eating, I'm knocking the weeds down at the bottom of it. I go right across over the top of a huge black snake. Things like 6 feet or better. It's as big around as my wrist. He's not poisonous, but he's one of those snakes that'll make you hurt yourself, kind of thing. And so I come across him, and yeah, that was scary, and I don't know what to do. And so I just begin to kind of weed trim him. I'm trying to do that, but he's so big, I'm not doing any harm to him, but I am making him pretty mad. And, man, he's striking out, and I'm like, National Geographic would have liked this. No, it wouldn't. And I'm like, I'm jumping back, and he turns, and he starts crawling into the tie wall, into this big retaining wall. And he's kind of slowly disappearing, and my mind is reeling. I'm like going, what do I do? Because I'm thinking, you got a family here. You've got, and I'm going to have to do this all summer long. And, all this is playing forward, and he's disappearing, and there's about this much of him hanging out of the wall. And I put the trimmer down, and I grab his tail. Now, I don't know why I did that, but I did it. And I'm, again, how do you get there? This was a now what moment, because I got this thing by the tail, and now what? And so I begin to pull. And it's this tug of war, and he's coming out, and he's coming out, and he's coming out. And I literally have this thing like this, and his head is still on the ground. He is huge. I don't know what to do. I've done smarter things in my life, trust me. And so I just kind of begin to do this, and the centrifugal force is kind of keeping him long here, and I'm like, but I can't do this all day. I got to do something with this, and it's a little scary, and now what kind of deal? And so as I'm just, something's got to change, right? And so I let him go, and he kind of goes back, and in my mind I'm going, did that just happen? Did I just do that? Did that really just happen? And why did you do that? And I'm looking at this wall, and I'm like, oh, there's more of you. Like, this is, now what moments in the spiritual kind of go that direction too. Sometimes we find ourselves in a situation, and we've grabbed hold of something, and we don't know what to do with it. We find ourselves in a situation we thought we had our life planned out, or we had our decisions planned out, but something happened. We've got a snake by the tail in my context, or maybe the tiger by the tail, and what do you do with that? And you know what? We serve the Lion of Judah, amen? The Lion of Judah could take care of a tiger, he could take care of a snake, and sometimes we find ourselves there, and God's calling us to something, and we're going, well, do I? Doing or denying that. This is out of my league. This is something I hadn't planned for. This is something that I didn't see coming. This is something, Lord, are you sure? Like I found myself here. I found myself in this situation. I found myself grabbing hold of this. I don't know what to do now. And those are now moments. That's that now what moment that we're talking about. And we all have this, we all understand this term denial. You see somebody's life, and maybe there's a truth that's playing out in their life, and they're kind of pushing it away, and we say they're living in denial, meaning that they're living in a contradiction of what is appearing in their life. They're making decisions that we know are not good decisions, and as this plays out, it doesn't have a good ending, but they're going, oh no, everything's okay, everything's okay. Now what moments kind of bring us to those things of denial? I want to give you a working definition. We know what doing is. So if we're talking about God's will and doing God's will, it involves obedience, it involves hearing Him, it involves action, forward thinking. This is doing. But denial, what would be denying spiritually God, denying His purposes, denying His opportunity? What would that look like? Let me give you a definition of the word deny. Deny means to reject, means to refuse. But then there's this other word that it also means, is to contradict. It means it may say one thing but does another. It's contradictory. I think there's a lot of people that live in spiritual denial. Something God's called them to, an opportunity God's presented. Maybe they didn't see that one coming. They've hit this now what moment, and they don't like it. It's scary. And maybe God's called them to, you know what? I'm going to give you the power to take hold of this. I'm going to give you the power to get through this. I'm going to give you the power to do something that in your normal response you wouldn't do. This happens all the time, and I think Christians a lot of times deny those moments. Well, God, no, I'm not doing that. And I think it's a response that literally causes us to live in spiritual denial. So I want to get your mind thinking about this idea of doing and denying according to God's will in that now what moment. A few years ago, Heather and I, we went to Mall of America, and walking around, if you've never been there or if you have been there, you know this place is huge. It's just massive. And there was this one store, and they had a display on the outside, and they were selling Rolex watches. Rolex watches. A Rolex is a luxury timepiece. They're very, very expensive, and we're looking at these, not to buy them. It was intriguing, and we're standing there, and the guy that worked there is standing outside the door, and he sees us looking at this display, and he goes, "Hey, you interested in a Rolex?" I go, No, I'm good. And he said, "Oh no, come on in. I'll show you some." I'm like, "No, really, I'm not. We're just totally looking." He goes, "No, that's fine. I would love to show you what a Rolex looks like and everything. Have you ever put one on?" And I'm like, No. And so anyway, he talks us in. We go in. He puts on white gloves. He takes this Rolex out, and he's like, "This is beautiful." He's telling me all about it, and it is. It's a gorgeous watch and everything. And I go, "How much for that?" And he goes, "This one's $75,000. And I look at Heather and I go, "Hey, we should get 2 matching Rolexes. That would be great." And hey, by the way, I was married 28 years yesterday, Heather and I. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, honey, I bought us some Rolex. No, I'm teasing. No. I go, "Wow, $75,000. Like, what in the world? Yeah, this is real gold and all this. And that's a diamond and blah, blah, blah." And we're going through. Beautiful watch, right? He goes, "Here, try this one. This one is really extraordinary." And he goes, "You want to put it on?" And I go, "No, I'm good." And he goes, "No, put it on. And I put it on. And honestly, it was heavy. I felt like I'd be like walking, kind of, if I had that. And I go, "Well, how much is this one?" And he goes, "That one's $125. I'm like, "Okay, take that off right now." And Rolex. He said, "You want to know how you can spot a fake with a Rolex?" He said, "A regular watch, the second hand will kind of tick. I guess to you it would be like this, right?" And he goes, "A Rolex is just a constant movement." It's just, he goes, "So a lot of people think they bought a Rolex because it was so dirt cheap. They got it for $30. He goes, "It's not a Rolex unless it's stolen." But he said a Rolex, and he talked about all the technical jargon and everything. Luxury timepiece. It's the real thing. And I started thinking about, the picture you get, or sometimes you've seen in movies, the guy's on the street corner and he like opens the coat and he goes, "Want to watch? I got Rolexes and all that, $30, kind of thing." And maybe they are stolen, but it's stolen merchandise. But a real Rolex, they're very, very expensive. The real thing of anything worthwhile, of anything of value, is expensive. God offers us the real thing. He offers us the real thing. We're prone, and we'll talk about this, to deny the real thing. We're prone to settle for the cheap thing, to settle for the quick thing, to settle for the easy thing. And in a now what moment, sometimes the things that come our way, God calls us to. It requires faith. Faith sometimes is more expensive than we're willing to pay. No, I want to know. God, just show me, and then, and it doesn't work that way. What God has for you, though, is the real thing, and it's worth your everything, and it's worth the cost, and it's better than any copy or rendition, no matter how good it may look on the surface. If you're taking notes, I want to give you this thought. In a now what moment. I think some of you are in now what moments. I think some watching online, you're in a now what moment. I've got a hold of this. I'm in this position. I didn't see this coming. And it's this now what moment. Perception can become more important than power. Perception can become more important than power. What I mean is sometimes it may be easier, it may be cheaper to buy into the knockoff, or to buy into your own power, or to put on a good front, or to put a mask on. You ever ask somebody, hey, how are you doing? They go, oh, I'm doing great. But you know that's a contradiction to what is really going on. You see it on them. You know them well enough. You may have some background information. Are you sure you're doing good? Oh, yeah, I'm doing good. Hey, are you? How's your walk with the Lord? How's your faith? Oh, yeah, it's great. When in reality, it's not. It's because there's this premise of humanity that we have power, but we don't have enough power, especially in those areas. Now what? When we're going through it, when we're at that line, that we may opt for perception over power, but God has power available to us. Amen? He has His power available to us. He makes that power available to His people, especially in those now what moments. And I think the days we're living in right now, I refer to them as the last days. I think Jesus is coming back pretty quick. I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. I think we're going to see persecution. I think we're going to see a time where the church, God's people, Christians, not just people who say they're Christians, but people who truly are Christians, are going to be brought to a now what moment, and we're going to have to choose doing or denying. I think it's happening. I think it will play out. The Apostle Paul tells Timothy, his disciple, he's telling him in the New Testament about the last days, and he's beginning to describe them to him. He's beginning to describe, I believe, what we even see now playing out. He says this in 2 Timothy 3:1-9. He says, but understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. Well, that's an understatement sometimes. For some of you, if I ask you, hey, you got some difficult things going on, you would say that's an understatement. Yeah, you're at a now what moment. You may be one step into it or 10 steps into a now what. Now what? I don't know what to, I got a hold of this thing, and it's just, I don't know what to do with this. Understand, the last days, there'll come times of difficulty. He says, verse 2, he describes what's going on in people's hearts, their minds. He says, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. I mean, that's some pretty hard descriptives. Some of you here, you got young families, you had breakfast this morning, you go, that just described our breakfast time together, you know. Difficult times, last days. But here's the concerning part, verse 5. Having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. There's this denial, this spiritual denial of the power. It looks good on the surface, but it's not the real thing. It looks like, it has the appearance of, it has a rendition. It looks like it's well put together, but it's still, at the end of the day, it lacks power. Oh yeah, as I look at it, it's a fake. I think there's a lot of people walking around in this quandary of the now what moment that they have denied what God has made available. But it comes by faith. They have denied, they've pushed it back. That's out of my league, Lord, I can't do this. And God goes, that's why I'm offering you my power. But sometimes we settle for that perception over power. That's what Paul is telling Timothy here, is this characteristic they're going to have in the last days, an appearance of godliness, but denying its power. He says, avoid such people. Oh God, help the church, help you and me, help Christians, followers of Christ. If the world senses that what we offer and what we're living is not the real thing, has the appearance of godliness, but it has no power behind it. That's what Paul's saying, a mark of the last days. He says, for among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins and led astray by various passions. He says this, verse 7, always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. I've had multiple conversations with people over the years, and I read this, and this is really good, and I'm going to do this and this and this and this. But you look at their life and what it's producing and the decisions that they're making, it's not panning out that way. It's as though somebody is literally falling apart, and you ask them, how are things going? And they say, oh, yeah, it's going great, going great. And you see everything falling apart. That's what he's talking about here, marks of the last days, always seeking, but never learning, never truly coming into that knowledge of the truth. Verse 8, he says, just as, and he throws two names out here, and we're going to key in on them in a moment. It's just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses. Okay, there's two names many of you have never heard of. So these men also opposed the truth. In descriptive of men of the last days, people of the last days, it says they're just like Jannes and Jambres. They opposed Moses, so these men also, these last days, opposed truth, men corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding the faith. But they will not get very far, for their folly will be plain to all, as was that of those two men. So Jannes and Jambres are two names we don't hear much about. Historically, you go back, extra biblical books in history, these two names are prominent. They were Egyptian magicians. They were Egyptian magicians. They had the understanding of smoke and mirrors. They had the understanding that at Pharaoh's call, they were sorcerers, as the Bible describes them. They were part of a group of people that served under Pharaoh. And these were the men that Moses and Aaron faced off at one point. I want to take you back into Moses' story, and then we'll move forward to when he encountered them. Because Moses had to go through some now what times in his life, multiple times, just like all of us, we go through multiple now what moments. But here was Moses' now what moment. He has fled Egypt for his life. He had committed a murder. You can go back and read the whole story there. And for 40 years, he's been gone. For 40 years, he's off in the desert. He has got his family now. He's working for his father-in-law. He has got a career. He knows kind of what to expect as he works the fields, as he works the herd. And he looks up on the mountain, and here's this burning bush experience. And he goes up, and here's this bush, and it's burning, but it's not being consumed. And he has an encounter with the Lord, and the Lord begins to speak to him through the bush, and here's this voice, and God is calling him to go back to Egypt to deliver the children of Israel, to go back and talk to Pharaoh. I mean, this was huge. Moses, he grew up in Pharaoh's family. He grew up, he knew the system, but he's been gone for 40 years. He's been gone for such a time that he literally could play the excuse like many of us do. Oh, that was so back then. That was so far back there. What could you do in my life now? I mean, some of you are sitting there with a calling on your life. God put as a little kid an idea about being a missionary or a pastor or making a difference, and you've just kind of sat there with it, and at that now what moment, we could say even you denied it. You've pushed it off. Moses is trying to do that with God right here. In this story, he's trying to say, no, God, this is not you. And God, in God fashion, does what God does, and he begins to assure, and he begins to encourage. He says, Moses, he says, put your hand in your cloak. He puts his hand in his cloak. He says, take it out. He takes it out. It's leprosy all over his hand. God says, put your hand back in your cloak. He puts it back in his cloak. He says, take it out. Take it out. It's clean. Hey, that's a pretty good trick, God. That's pretty neat. I like that. That's good. Hey, Moses, take your staff. Throw it down. And I can really appreciate this part of the story in Moses' life right here. Because he throws it down and it becomes a serpent. And then God said, Moses, take it by the tail. Now, been there, done that. That is not a fun experience. So I understand Moses' fear firsthand right there. Moses takes it by the tail and it turns back in to a staff. Now, God begins to give him these things. These are powerful things. These are pretty cool things. Could you imagine putting your hand in your pocket and then taking it out and it's got leprosy all over it? Or it's all shriveled up and you put it back in your pocket and you bring it out and it's all fine. I mean, that's likened to what happened here. You throw this down, you pick it up after it's turned into a snake and you pick it up. So God is assuring, he's encouraging. This is a now what moment. God has the call on him. I want to send you back. I'm sending you in. I'm putting you out there. You got this. I'm with you. You know, sometimes, write this down, in a now what moment, God equips us to do, but there's a tendency to deny. God equips us to do. God gives us everything we need to accomplish his will. He always does. There will be faith involved, and it will require us to lean into his power, not our own. And there will be this aspect of God equipping us to do, but there will be the tendency, that's our natural tendency, to deny, to push back, to excuse away. I can't see it right now, Lord. You show me, and then I will. And Moses is right there. So if you say, well, you know, that's not like me. I want to be stronger than that. No, Moses, when I think of stellar faith, I think of Moses. I don't think of perfection, but I think of better than me. But when I read his story, I see that he struggled with the same things I struggle with, the same things you struggle with at a now what moment. And that's where Moses is, and this tendency to deny, it's huge. God is equipping. Moses is positioning himself to deny. Here it is, Exodus 4, 10 through 13. But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue." He's saying, I don't talk good. I'm messed up here. I can't do this. And Lord, therefore, that would disqualify. So these tricks are nice, but yeah, this doesn't. Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord?" I mean, could you imagine? I mean, we do this. I say, could you imagine it? You do this if you push back, if you deny the things of God, if you opt for a copy or you opt for something cheaper. This is what you do. Moses is doing it. You're going to the one who created you, the one who knows you. We sang about it. I am who you say that I am. Why is that? I love in the story, we're not going to read this part of it, because one of Moses' excuses are, if they ask who's sending me, I mean, like, what am I going to say? Who am I going to say? And God says, you tell them, I am sent you. See, God's perfectly knowing, perfectly able, understands who he is. He knows it. He never questions his being. He knows who he is. You tell him, I am sent you. And that same I am is the one who knows you better than you know yourself. And if God calls you and God positions you in a now what moment and offers you his power, then there is no excuse. Yet like Moses, we can find them. Moses, boy, he's searching. You know what, God, this is great, but I can't talk. And God says, didn't I create you? I'm that one. He says, verse 12, now therefore go, and I'll be with your mouth and teach you what you shall say. But he said, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. What great denial. What unfathomable denial. When we read the story, we go, boy, Moses, you're a mess. Like God just showed you all that. God just revealed all that. And you're still denying him. Think of your own life. How many times God brings us to a now what moment and we go, Lord, if you showed me more, if you revealed more, God, if I felt better about myself, if I thought I was stronger, then I would. And we totally deny everything God makes available to us. Moses is is following suit here. We know God provided Aaron, Moses' brother, to help him speak, to help him talk. But if it were up to Moses, he would have taken the easy way out. God, that sounds like a great idea, but send someone else. Matter of fact, I'll pray for them. God, send somebody else, and I'll be faithful in prayer about them and what you're doing in their life, and then I'll be a part. I'll support them financially, and I'm not saying those things are wrong, but if God called you to do it, then it's in denial if you don't. So now what? Now what? Maybe you're here and you're pretty good at putting together something that could be characterized as a good show. It's good front, it's good mask. It's something that, unless it's looked at very closely, you would think it's the real thing. See, the last days, I'm telling you, church, the last days, I think the copy, the rendition, the cheap Christianity won't cut it. There will be doing or denying. There will not be a middle ground. And I think God is bringing his people and his church to that point. He did with Moses. 2 Timothy 3:8, again, the two guys I mentioned earlier, just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so these men also oppose the truth. Speaking of those in the last days, men corrupted in mind and disqualified regarding what? The faith. The faith. Misrepresenting the faith. Misrepresenting the real thing. Here's the story, Exodus 7:8-12. It says, Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron. So they have followed the Lord. They have gone there. They follow the Lord. When Pharaoh says to you, prove yourselves by working a miracle. Let my people go. Prove yourselves by working a miracle. Then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and cast it down before Pharaoh, that it may become a serpent. So they have their marching orders. They know what to expect. Here's the duties that you're going to do. And when this happens, here's what you're to do. And sometimes I think in our minds we get so engrossed in the script that we don't realize that God has some other things that may be occurring that he's doing. And this is one of those cases. So Moses and Aaron, verse 10, went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. They're obedient. Aaron cast down his staff before Pharaoh and his servants, and it became a serpent. If you're Moses and Aaron, you're standing there and you're like, does it? It's like, oh, they're going to like this one. This is a pretty good trick right here. This is good. Then Pharaoh, verse 11, summoned the wise men and the sorcerers. These were Jannes and Jambres, because they had tricks. They were part of this group. The magicians of Egypt also did the same by their secret arts. It's as though, God, you told me to do this and I did it, and it's no different than I knew it would be like that. And this is a now what moment happening right here. This is a now what moment of probably Moses' greatest fear, that if I obey you, Lord, I think you're going to leave me, or you're going to do something different, or you're going to... how many times do people play that out all the time in faith? God, I would follow you, but I want to know the whole scenario. I want to know the whole script. I want to know the little details. I want to know the what ifs, and that's a now what moment. They do the same thing for each man, says verse 12, cast down his staff, and they became serpents. But here's the difference. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. See, what God offers us is always better than what the enemy offers. Is always better than what the world offers. Though what God offers you may look like it was copied. It may look like it's the same thing. It would be like holding two watches together, and one is a real Rolex and one is a knockoff. And you say, I can't tell the difference, so I'm going to take the cheaper one. At the end of the day, it is cheaper, and there's a reason it's cheaper, because it's not made the same way. It doesn't have the same functionality. It doesn't have the same purpose. And the things of God, as shallow as that illustration is, the things of God, it may look like what the world offers is as good as what God offers, or better than what God offers, but it's not. See, what God offers us is the real thing. at a now what time, doing or denying, as he did with Moses, he does with us all the time. The end times approach. Ungodliness, immoral behavior, I think is going to grow. I think it's going to intensify. I think things are going to get worse before they ever get better. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that all of a sudden living by faith just gets easier. No, living by faith is always going to feel like living by faith. It's always going to have that feeling of, God, I don't have all the details. But you know what you do have? You have his promises. You have his power. You have his presence with you wherever he calls you. It feels like God's not with me in this. Maybe question, are you going where he called you to go? Well, he called me to do this, but I really felt like I should. Okay, right there, you denied the Lord. He doesn't bless that. You pushed it off. You contradicted it. You rejected it. He wants a church, as he is holy, he wants a church that lives holy, amen? As he's pure, he wants a church that's pure. You say, I keep messing up. Then it seems like you're living in your own power and not his. See, his power will give you power beyond anything you can do, beyond anything someone else can do. It gives you power. That same power the Bible promises that raised Jesus from the dead is available to you through the Holy Spirit. That's pretty powerful, amen? That's pretty powerful. I close with this. Now what? Now what? You know, I don't know what God's put on your heart or your mind. I don't know where God fits into the equation of your decisions, but I know this, that if you want to follow him, you're going to have now what moments. You're going to have those moments where you thought everything was planned out. I'm just going to just do this weed trimming job here and everything's going to be fine. I've done this before. I know what I'm dealing with. And all of a sudden, you're dealing with something you've never dealt with. All of a sudden, the situation changed. All of a sudden, something happened you didn't see coming. And then it may be in a situation God goes, take hold of that. And you go, I'm not touching that. I'm not going there. Not me. I'm scared of that. See, God gives us his power because he knows where he's taking us. It's not going to be an option of whether you take hold of his power or not. You have to have his power. If you don't take hold of his power, you're denying the gift of God. You're denying what's available to you. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work. That may describe your life. If you're here today and you're feeling like, something's lacking, something's missing, go to that line of now what? Go to that line. What did God say? What has God said? Where is he wanting you to do or to be? Where it could be right there that you've got this aspect of denial. You've got this aspect of denying him. It can come in the form of an excuse. It can come in the form of, it's just not the right time, Lord. But if God's called you to that, if God's spoken that, then his timing is perfect.
What an amazing word we just heard. Click here for video announcements and click here to subscribe and stay connected with Crosswalk Online.